cane tapped twice on tile. Slow, patient, the sound a man makes when his knees remember a jungle nobody else in this lobby has ever seen. He stood at the front desk of the busiest VA clinic in 3 counties, faded field jacket buttoned to the collar, a yellow paper in his trembling hand that the new nurse had just laughed at. She did not laugh out loud. She laughed with her eyes, with a quick sideways glance at the receptionist beside her, with the kind of pretty private smile young people use when they think an old man cannot read a room. He had read worse rooms in his life. He had read them under fire. He said nothing at all. He set the paper down. He waited, and 20 minutes later, the door behind him opened 7 times in a row. Stay with me on this one. The clinic smelled like printer paper and disinfectant, and the burned bottom of a coffee pot nobody had washed since morning shift. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a sound so constant you stop hearing it the way you stop hearing your own breathing. The waiting room held maybe 40 people. A woman in a wheelchair with an oxygen line clipped under her nose. A younger man, late 40s, missing his right leg below the knee, scrolling on his phone with the patience of someone who had learned that hurry never helped anyone. 2 old fellows in the back, gray ball caps that read Korea and Navy, leaning into each other to share a magazine. And by the window, a teenage volunteer in a blue vest, refilling a water cooler nobody had touched. The old man at the counter was tall. 6'2" when he could still stand straight, which was less and less these days. The cane was hickory. Plain. No carved eagle, no name plate, no veteran sticker. Just a piece of wood that had taken his weight for 19 years and showed no sign of giving up. His hair was the color of dry rope, cut short the way he had worn it since he was 18 years old, and a recruiter in a small Tennessee town had told him the Marine Corps was looking for boys who could shoot. He had been able to shoot. He had been able to do a lot of other things too, but those things had stayed inside him for 60 years. He had come in for a blood pressure check. Routine. Quarterly. His daughter had driven him from the farm an hour east, dropped him at the curb, and told him she had errands but would be back at noon sharp. She had kissed him on the cheek, the way she had been kissing him on the cheek since she was 4 years old, and she had said, "Daddy, please be nice to the people in there." He had told her he was always nice. She had looked at him the way grown daughters look at fathers who do not know themselves, and she had driven away. Inside, the line had been short. 2 people ahead of him. Then him. He stepped up to the counter slowly, the cane finding its quiet rhythm on the tile, and he set his appointment slip on the laminate. The nurse behind the desk was young. 24, maybe 25. Hair pulled back tight. A name tag clipped to her blue scrub top that he had not yet read. She was new. He could tell because she still moved like someone who believed every problem could be solved by reading the screen harder. He had seen 100 of her in 50 years of waiting rooms. She glanced at his slip. She tapped a few keys. She frowned. He waited. Outside, a delivery truck beeped as it backed into a loading bay. A child somewhere down the hall started crying and was quickly hushed. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The old man rested both hands on the head of his cane and breathed the slow, careful breath he had learned to breathe in long lines, in long nights, in long lives. "Sir," the nurse said, "this paper is the old version. We do not use yellow anymore. We use the blue one. Did you fill out the blue one online before you came in?" He had not. He did not have a computer. He had a flip phone his daughter had bought him in 2014. He told her this. Quietly, without apology. She sighed. The kind of sigh a young person makes when an old person has just confirmed every assumption she had made when she watched him walk in. She pulled a blue form out of a tray. She slid it across the counter with a pen. She said, "Fill this out. All of it. Both sides. And try to keep up okay. Lots of people behind you." There were 2 people behind him. He glanced over his shoulder to be sure. 2. He looked back at the nurse. She had already turned to the receptionist beside her and said something he could not hear, and the receptionist had smiled the small private smile of people who share a joke at someone else's expense and think the someone else is too old to notice. He noticed. He noticed because noticing is what had kept him alive in 1968, when other men his age were not noticing and were not coming home. But noticing is not the same as reacting. In the jungle, a man who reacted to every twig snap died of exhaustion before the enemy ever found him. You watched. You logged. You waited. You moved when moving was the thing. He picked up the pen. His hand shook a little. The shake was new this year. He began to fill out the blue form. Name, address, date of birth, service branch, service dates. He paused at service dates, not because he did not remember. He remembered them the way a man remembers the date his mother died. He paused because he never knew how to fit 2 years and 4 months into a small printed box on government paper. Those 2 years and 4 months had taken him from a barn in East Tennessee to a place on a map nobody called by its real name anymore, and they had taken 3 of the 11 boys he had gone over with and given them back in flag-draped boxes. He wrote the dates. He moved on. Insurance section. He checked the box that said none. Emergency contact. He wrote his daughter's name. He filled the form the way he did most things now, carefully, slowly, with the resigned competence of a man who had stopped trying to be fast around 1995 and had not missed it. When he was halfway down the second side, the nurse leaned across the counter. "Sir," she said, a little louder than she needed to be. "If you keep going at that pace, we are not going to make it. Can someone help you with that? Maybe the volunteer." She gestured at the teenage boy by the window. The teenage boy looked up, embarrassed for everyone in the room except himself. He had a grandfather. He understood what was happening. He did not move. The old man at the counter set the pen down. Just for a second. He looked at her. Not unkindly. Not angrily. He looked at her the way a teacher looks at a student who has answered a question wrong and does not yet know it. Then he picked the pen back up and he kept filling out the form. The silence he carried into that room was older than her parents. Behind her, the receptionist whispered something else. The nurse laughed. A small laugh. The kind of laugh that travels 3 feet and dies. She thought it had died. It had not. The Korea cap and the Navy cap in the back row had heard it. Both old heads turned slowly, like turrets, and locked on the front desk. Neither man said a word. They went back to their magazine. But they did not turn the page. The old man finished the form. He slid it back across the counter. He set the pen on top of it. He said, in a voice so quiet you had to lean toward it the way you lean toward a low fire, "Ma'am, you have my form." He turned and walked with that twice-tapping cane to a chair against the far wall. He sat down. He folded his hands in his lap. He waited. The nurse picked up the form. She did not look at the service section. She looked at the insurance box, marked none, and she rolled her eyes. She put the form in a manila folder. She set the folder in a wire tray on the wall. She forgot him within 12 seconds. He counted. For the next 11 minutes, nothing happened. A woman was called back. A man with a cough was called back. A janitor pushed a yellow mop bucket past the front desk, and the wheels squeaked twice on a wet patch of tile. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The clock above the door ticked toward 11:30. The old man did not move. He sat the way he had sat in 100 ambush positions in 100 jungles, his weight forward, his hands quiet, his breathing slow, his eyes neither closed nor wide open but somewhere in the middle, taking in everything and reacting to nothing. The nurse glanced at him twice. Both times she looked away quickly, as if his stillness made her uncomfortable in a way she could not name. This was the moment, if a movie had been made of his life, when the music would have gone quiet. The kind of quiet that is not empty. The kind of quiet that is loaded. He was not angry. Anger is a young man's tool. He was waiting. He was waiting because somewhere out there, on a road heading toward this building, was a thing he had not told anyone about, because telling would have ruined it. His daughter, who was not running errands at all, was at that moment turning into the parking lot 2 blocks away. Behind her, in 2 separate vehicles, were 7 men in their 70s, in clean shirts and pressed pants, and the kind of shoes old Marines polish out of habit on a Sunday night. They had flown in from 4 states. They had not been all together in one room since 1971. His daughter had spent 6 months finding them. Today was his 78th birthday. She had not told him. The plan was to walk in, surprise him in the waiting room, take him to lunch. The old man did not know this. Not exactly. But he knew his daughter, and he knew she had kissed his cheek a little longer than usual that morning, and he knew, the way old men know, that something was coming. The trick was not to flinch. He sat. The clock ticked. The nurse laughed at something on her phone. The Korea cap in the back row tapped the Navy cap on the knee and pointed his chin, very slightly, at the front door. The door opened. The first man through it was thin. White hair. Tall. A gold pin on his collar so small most people would never have seen it. A fouled anchor and a globe so small you could miss it in a single glance. He held the door for the man behind him, who walked with a slight limp and a wide black wristwatch. That man held it for the man behind him, who carried a small American flag rolled around its stick. That man held it for the man behind him, a black man, broad-shouldered, with a Marine Corps League ball cap and a smile that had not changed in 50 years. That man held it for the man behind him, who held it for the man behind him, who held it for the man behind him. 7 men. White hair, no hair, gray hair, one ponytail of pure silver. Field jackets, polo shirts, one cardigan. Canes for 3 of them. A walker for 1. They came in slowly, the way old soldiers move when they are still trying to look sharp, and they did not look around the room. They looked at one chair. The chair against the far wall. The chair holding the old man with the hickory cane. Behind them, his daughter slipped in last, eyes already wet, a paper bag from a bakery hanging from her wrist. She stayed by the door. This was not her moment. The old man looked up. He saw them. His face did not move at first. Then his eyes did the thing his face had not learned to do in 60 years. The small, wet thing eyes do when a man sees a brother he had stopped believing was still walking the earth. If you are still with me, hit that subscribe button. Because what happens in the next 90 seconds in that VA lobby is something the new nurse will tell her grandchildren about, and she does not even know it yet. The first man through the door, the thin one with the white hair and the small pin, stopped about 4 steps in. He looked at the old man in the field jacket. He looked at the nurse behind the front desk. He looked back at the old man. He smiled. Not a big smile. The smile of a man who has been waiting a very long time for a very small thing. Gunny, he said. The word was not loud. It carried anyway. It carried the way certain words always carry in rooms full of veterans, the way the word medic carries, or the word incoming, or the name of a place nobody talks about over Thanksgiving dinner. Every old head in that waiting room turned at once. The Korea cap. The Navy cap. The woman in the wheelchair with the oxygen line, whose late husband had been a Marine. The 44-year-old vet with the missing leg, who had not heard that word used like that in 20 years and felt his throat close. Gunny, the white-haired man, said again. We made it. The old man with the hickory cane stood up. Slowly. Both hands on the cane. Knees protesting. He stood up the way men of his age stand up when standing matters. He stood at a kind of attention his body could not quite hold anymore, but his spine still remembered how to attempt. The cane took his left side. His right hand came up to his eyebrow in a salute that was not crisp, was not parade ground, was barely a salute at all by Marine Corps standards. It was perfect. The white-haired man returned it. So did the man with the small flag. So did the man with the walker. So did the black man with the Marine Corps League cap. So did the rest. 7 salutes in a row in a county VA clinic on a Tuesday morning, given to a man at a chair by the wall, by men who had not been in the same room together since a helicopter had carried them off a hilltop in 1971. The nurse at the front desk did not understand what she was seeing. Not yet. She had stopped typing. Her hand was suspended over her keyboard. Her mouth was just a little bit open. The receptionist beside her had stood up without realizing it, hand at her chest, the way people stand at the playing of an anthem. That is when the door to the inner office opened, and the hospital administrator walked out. His name was Daniel Reyes. Late 50s. Navy reservist himself, 20 years. He had been a clinic administrator for 9 years. He had heard, through the small grapevine that runs through every government building, that there was something happening at the front desk. He had come out to see. He came out the way he always came out, sleeves rolled to the elbow, ID badge clipped at the hip, a polite mister. Ray's smile already on his face. The smile fell off his face by the third step. He stopped. He looked at the 7 men. He looked at the front desk. He looked back at the 7 men. His eyes locked on the white-haired man with the small pin. The fouled anchor and globe pin. The pin so small most people would never have seen it. The white-haired man met his eyes. Gave him a small nod. Just a nod. The kind of nod between 2 men who recognize each other across a span of years and ranks and rooms. Daniel Reyes put both hands at his sides. Heels together. Spine straight. He did not know he was doing it. His body had done it for him. Marines do it when they recognize, in a room, a man who has been the Marine Corps' most senior man in uniform. A commandant. A 4-star general. A man whose photograph used to hang in every recruit depot in this country. Retired now. Civilian clothes. Small pin. Walking into a county VA clinic on a Tuesday morning behind 6 other old Marines. The white-haired man did not need the recognition. He was not there for it. But he accepted it the way a courteous man accepts any kindness, with a small inclination of the head. Then he turned very deliberately, and he looked at the front desk. He looked at the nurse. He did not glare. He did not scowl. He looked at her with a calm, level, lifelong officer's attention, the kind of attention that does not raise its voice, because raising a voice is for people who have not been listened to in a long time, and he had not had that problem since 1973. He said, "Ma'am." She did not answer. Her throat had stopped working. He said, "Ma'am, my brother-in-arms walked in here this morning with a yellow paper. He has been carrying that yellow paper for 20 years. The yellow paper was good enough for this country in 1968 when we needed him, and it is good enough for this country today. I would consider it a kindness if you could explain to me, slowly, exactly why he was made to stand at this counter and feel small." Behind him, his daughter pressed both hands over her mouth. The bakery bag swung from her wrist. The 2 old men in the back row, the Korea cap and the Navy cap, had risen out of their chairs and were now standing, hats off, held over their hearts. The nurse opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. She said, sir, I did not know." "That is the trouble," the white-haired man said. Quietly, almost gently. "That is the whole trouble. You did not know. Nobody ever does. And that is precisely the time a person finds out what kind of nurse, what kind of clerk, what kind of human being they are going to be in this life. When they do not know." Daniel Reyes had not moved. He stood 3 feet behind the white-haired man, hands at his sides, eyes on the nurse. Slowly, without taking his eyes off her, he said, "Linda." He said the receptionist's name. He said it the way a father says a child's name when the child has done something the father needs to address, but is not yet ready to address in front of company. "Linda, please bring me the gentleman's intake form." "The yellow one." "Not the blue one. The yellow one." Linda did not move at first. Then she did. She went to the wire tray on the wall, pulled out the manila folder, opened it, and brought the yellow paper to Daniel Reyes with both hands. The way you hand a baby. The way you hand a folded flag. Daniel Reyes took it. He glanced at the service section. He glanced at the dates. He glanced at one specific line in small print near the bottom, a line the nurse had never read, a line stamped in red by a clerk in 1979 and restamped by another clerk in 1992 and still legible today. He read it. He looked up. He looked at the old man with the hickory cane, who was still standing by his chair against the far wall, surrounded now by his 6 brothers, the white-haired commandant standing slightly apart, watching. Daniel Reyes said, in a clear voice that carried across the entire waiting room, Gunnery Sergeant Earl Whitaker, United States Marine Corps, Vietnam, II Tour, recipient of the Medal of Honor, awarded 1969 for actions on Hill 484. Welcome to this clinic. We are honored. The waiting room went still, in a way waiting rooms almost never go still. The wheelchair woman with the oxygen. The 44-year-old vet with the missing leg. The janitor with the mop bucket, who had stopped pushing 5 minutes ago and was now standing very straight by his bucket, eyes on the old man by the wall. The teenage volunteer in the blue vest, who had come back inside without anyone noticing and was now standing by the front door with both hands at his sides because his grandfather had taught him that is what a person does in a moment like this. Earl Whitaker, 78 years old, leaning on his hickory cane, did the thing he always did when the room got too big. He looked down at his shoes. He cleared his throat once. He said, "Thank you, son." He did not say it loudly. He did not need to. The nurse at the front desk had begun, very quietly, to cry. Not loud crying. The small, careful crying of a young person who has just discovered, in a single 60-second window, that the way she had been moving through a room had a cost she had not been willing to count. Daniel Reyes turned to her. His voice was lower now. He said, "Megan." He used her first name. He used it the way a man uses a person's first name when he has decided that the lesson is going to be useful and not cruel. "Megan, I am going to ask you to come around the desk. I am going to ask you to walk over to Gunnery Sergeant Whitaker. I am going to ask you to introduce yourself the way you would have introduced yourself if you had known. And then I am going to ask you to listen to him. For however long he is willing to talk to you. Because in about 10 minutes, the rest of his squad is going to take him to lunch, and you are going to spend the rest of your career remembering whether you took this chance or you did not." Megan came around the desk. She walked slowly. The whole room watched. She crossed the tile in those soft white nursing shoes, and she stopped about 3 feet from Earl Whitaker, and she said, in a voice that shook only a little, "Sir, my name is Megan. I am new here. I was wrong. I am very sorry." Earl Whitaker looked at her. He looked at her the way he had looked at her at the counter 20 minutes earlier. Not unkindly. Not angrily. He looked at her the way a teacher looks at a student who has finally answered the question right and is going to remember the answer for the rest of her life. He said, "Ma'am, you are forgiven. Come sit with me a minute." He moved sideways 1 step. He made room on the chair next to his. She sat. Her hands shook in her lap. He reached over slowly, and he put his old brown hand on top of her young pale hand, just for a second, just long enough for the heat of his palm to settle her, and he said, "I want you to do one thing for me. The next old man who walks in here with a yellow paper, you do not laugh. You walk around that counter. You take his arm. You walk him to a chair. You bring the paper to him. You do not make him stand at a counter to be small. Will you do that for me?" She nodded. She could not speak. She nodded again, harder. He patted her hand once. He let it go. He turned to the white-haired man with the small pin and said, "General, I believe my daughter has been holding a paper bag from a bakery for about 8 minutes now, and if I know her, that bag contains a chocolate cake with a number on it I do not want to discuss in public." The white-haired man, who had been the commandant of the Marine Corps from 1995 to 1999, who had stood next to 2 presidents and shaken hands with 3 popes, smiled the smile of a man who had not been called general in his own life by his own brother for 50 years, and laughed a small laugh that was not pretty and not small. He said, "Gunny, you got it." The 7 of them, plus Earl Whitaker, plus his daughter, plus the bakery bag, walked out of the front of that VA clinic in single file, the way they used to walk through grass that did not love them. The wheelchair woman with the oxygen saluted from her chair as they passed. The Korea cap and the Navy cap stood up again with their hats over their hearts. The 44-year-old vet with the missing leg did not cry until they had cleared the door, and then he cried the way a man cries when something he had forgotten about his own country has just walked past him in a faded field jacket and a hickory cane. The room stayed quiet for a long time after the door closed. Daniel Reyes walked over to Megan, still sitting in the chair against the far wall. He sat down beside her. Then he said, "He gave you a gift, Megan. Do you know what kind of gift he gave you?" She shook her head. He said, "He gave you the chance to find out who you were going to be before it was too late to be somebody better. Most of us do not get that gift until we are 40, 50, 60 years old, if we get it at all. He gave it to you on a Tuesday morning at 24. Do not waste it." She did not waste it. She finished her shift. She came back the next day. She started keeping a small notebook in her scrub pocket where she wrote down the names of every veteran who came through her line, the units they had served in, the names of dogs and grandkids in hometowns, and she would ask about those names by name the next time those men walked in. She did this for the next 31 years. She is 55 now. She is the head of nursing at that same VA clinic. There is a small wooden plaque on her office door that says, in burned letters, "Walk around the counter," and most of the people who walk past it have no idea what it means. Earl Whitaker lived another 9 years. He died at home, on the farm in his own bed, with his daughter holding his right hand and a great-grandson holding his left. The hickory cane was leaning against the bedpost. The faded field jacket was folded on a chair. The Medal of Honor was in a shadow box on the wall, where his wife had hung it before she passed in 2009, and where he had never made a speech about it, not once, in 57 years. The 7 men from the squad were at his funeral. 6 of them. 1 had gone the year before. The white-haired commandant stood at the head of the casket and read a single line out loud. The line was, "He was the best of us." Then he stepped back. Old Marines do not need to say more. Megan was at the funeral too. She drove 4 hours. She did not introduce herself to the family. She stood at the back of the church and cried the way people cry when they are saying thank you to somebody who can no longer hear them. She still has the notebook. She has filled 47 of them. They sit on a shelf in her office in order by year. The first page of the first notebook says only Earl Whitaker. Yellow paper. Walk around the counter. Some lessons cost the people teaching them everything they ever had. Some lessons cost the people learning them nothing but a moment of shame and a lifetime of remembering. Earl Whitaker paid for Megan's lesson on a hill in 1968 with 3 friends he never stopped missing, and he gave her the change on a Tuesday morning at a counter she had not yet learned how to stand behind. If you have a veteran in your life, walk around the counter for him. If you are a veteran yourself, and you are still carrying a yellow paper, know that there are people in this country who would stand up out of their chairs and take their hats off the moment they understood what you had done. The luckiest ones, like Megan, get to spend the rest of their lives becoming the kind of person who would have done it from the start. A cane tapped twice on tile. Slow. Patient. That is how it began. That is how, for one Tuesday morning in a county VA clinic, an entire room of strangers remembered something about this country nobody had bothered to write down. And that, friend, is a story worth carrying with you the rest of the week.